everyone, it's Connie Alexander Jacks at White House Real Estate, and today I am answering your questions. This question is from Candace, a potential home buyer. Candace wants to know, what is earnest money? Well, Candace, earnest money is a deposit made to a seller that represents a buyer's good faith to buy a home. The money gives the buyer extra time to get financing and to conduct the title search, property appraisal, and inspection before closing. So in many ways, earnest money can be considered a deposit on a home, an escrow deposit, or good faith money. In most cases, earnest money is delivered when the sales contract or purchase agreement is signed by all parties, but it can also be attached to an offer. Once deposited, the funds are typically held in an escrow account until closing, at which time the deposit is applied to the buyer's down payment and their closing cost, coming back to the buyer as a credit at closing. So earnest money is essentially a deposit a buyer makes on a home that they want to purchase. A contract's written up, the exchange of the earnest money outlines the conditions for refunding that amount. Also note, earnest money deposits can be anywhere from 1% to 10% of a sales price, depending mostly on market interest. We'll get to that in just a minute. When a buyer decides to purchase a home from a seller, both parties enter into a contract, but the contract doesn't obligate the buyer to purchase the home because reports from the home appraisal and or the inspection may later reveal problems with the house. So the contract does, however, ensure the seller takes the house off the market while it's being inspected and appraised. To prove the buyer's offer to purchase, the property is made in good faith. The buyer makes an earnest money deposit, also known as an EMD. The buyer might be able to reclaim the earnest money deposit if something that was specified ahead of time in the contract goes wrong. For instance, the earnest money would be returned if the house doesn't appraise for the sales price or if the inspection reveals a serious defect, provided that these contingencies are listed ahead of time in the contract. So, earnest money isn't always refundable. For example, the seller gets to keep the earnest money if the buyer decides not to go through with the home purchase for contingencies not listed in the contract, or if the buyer fails to meet the timeline outlined in the contract. This is so important. The buyer will, of course, forfeit the earnest money deposit if they simply have a change of heart and decide not to purchase the home. Earnest money is always returned to the buyer if the seller terminates the deal. While the buyer and the seller can negotiate the earnest money deposit, it often ranges between 1% and 3% of a home's purchase price, depending on the market. In hot housing markets like right now, earnest money deposit might range between 5% and 10% of a property sales price. So while the earnest money deposit is often a percentage of the sales price, some sellers just simply want a fixed amount, such as $5,000 or $10,000. And of course, the higher the earnest money amount, the more serious the seller is likely to consider the buyer. So a buyer should offer a high enough earnest money deposit to be accepted, but not one so high as to put extra money at risk. That's where you need us. Earnest money is usually paid by a certified check, personal check, or a wire transfer into a trust account that is held by a real estate brokerage, legal firm, or title company. The funds are held into the account until closing, and then they're applied towards the buyer's down payment or closing cost. It's also important to note that escrow accounts, like any other bank account, can earn interest. And if that happens and the earnest funds in the escrow account earn an interest more than $600, the buyer has to fill out a W-9 tax form and submit that to the IRS. We want to protect your earnest money deposit. So prospective buyers can do several things to protect their earnest money deposit, such as make sure contingencies for financing and inspection are included in the contract. Without these, the deposit could be forfeited if the buyer can't get financing or a serious defect is found during the inspection. So you need to read, understand, and abide by the terms of the contract. So if the contract states that the home inspection must be completed by a certain date, the buyer must meet that deadline or risk losing the deposit and the house. We don't want that. Make sure the deposit is handled appropriately. The deposit should be made payable to a reputable third party, such as a well-known real estate brokerage, escrow company, title company, or legal firm. Never give the deposit directly to the seller. You should also verify the funds are going to be held in an escrow account and obtain a receipt. If you have any other questions about earnest money, escrows, or purchasing a home, I would love to answer those questions. Drop your questions below. I'm going to be doing a series all month long to be able to make sure that we answer these questions. Candace, I hope that this helped, and I hope that we can get you on the fast track to a home purchase soon. Have a wonderful day.